The year is 2049. This is the year China threatens to control the world, and by 2035 make China a modern socialist power. But there is one wrench in this plan. One that could be the result of another war in ways that we have never seen before. And it all starts with this small country off the border of China, Taiwan. Understanding the importance of Taiwan for China all starts with this circle. No, not that one, this one. This is a silicon chip. It's used to power almost anything that has technology in it. From the screen you are watching this video on, to this microphone, microwave, fan, and even computer. In essence, that means these chips control the entire world. Without them, we couldn't do almost anything that requires technology or even have the internet. So yeah, they're pretty vital. But these microchips, they're not just for consumers like you and I. They're also for something a lot bigger, an industry that's fighting tooth and nail for the latest and greatest. That industry is the military. Simple idea here is whoever can possess and develop the most powerful microchips can also have some of the most powerful weapons, because they will have the technology that other countries don't. Combine the high power weapons with a large, well-trained military, and you can have one of the most powerful militaries the world has ever seen. And for a country like China, that could be exactly what they need to accomplish their goal of achieving socialist modernization. The problem is all of this revolves around Taiwan. The world is dangerously dependent on the country. Let me ask you a question. Let's say the world had one bank, and that bank held 92% of global currency. If it failed, we'd be in some pretty deep trouble. Similar thing here. Obviously, the negatives aren't nowhere near as drastic as a whole global currency exchange failing, but the idea remains the same for the technology sector. 92% of high-end chips are manufactured in Taiwan. Without that country, only 8% of chips would be left, and that would be pretty bad. Like when COVID happened, right? We had all of these cars that had features be removed because of how bad the chip shortage was. Now imagine you don't just decrease the production of technology, but you completely eliminate it. Yeah, it's not good. And that very well could happen if TSMC's chip production was halted. When you have one dominant player with very little competition, is that good for their business? Absolutely, but not for the planet if something were to happen. Okay. Let's backtrack a little bit. For any of this to be even possible, Taiwan had to do something a little spontaneous, something the world was not expecting. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, a sub to the channel would be splendid. At the time, there were a lot of engineers in Taiwan leaving to get their education in the United States. They wanted to return home to their country, but there weren't many opportunities there. So they would stay in the US, and Taiwan's like, okay, what if we partner with you guys? We'll give you guys jobs, pay for travel costs, and give them tax breaks. And doing so would enable more engineers to start their own semiconductor companies in Taiwan, and then from there, the US would protect them. And no, the United States is not an official ally of Taiwan, but there are a few things that are really worth noting that we'll talk about a little later. This plan worked. One of these engineers is a guy named Morris Chang, who founded TSMC. Now, that company is the largest semiconductor manufacturing company in the world. Here's where the problem from China arises, though. They can't actually get any of these chips from Taiwan, which means other countries are using these highly advanced chips for their militaries and their technology, but China can't. That's not good. And China clearly does not like interdependence on other countries. So they're thinking, hey, why don't we just do this ourselves? Let's make our own chip manufacturing company just like Taiwan. And in theory, it makes sense, right? Like this iPhone I'm recording this video on, this mic, this computer, my watch, they were all most likely made in China. So why can't they just manufacture the chips too? Well, that doesn't actually work that well. They failed, right? They couldn't attract the right talent to their company, as anyone interested in becoming an engineer was focused on Taiwan and ASML, not China, a company that had no experience in building advanced computer chips. Yeah, they put together a lot of the components, but they're not actually making them from scratch. The thing is, China's track record of actually inventing this type of technology is really bad. Like, for example, China couldn't even figure out how to make a ballpoint pen until 2017, 100+ years after the pen was invented. Well, of course, we can all agree that a pen is a lot simpler to manufacture than a microchip with billions of little transistors on it. So, expectingly, when they did try to do it, it just didn't work. They were always behind the technological curve, and they're like, okay, we gotta figure something else out. So they start buying their chips from a country. Now, here's where things get really interesting. The world was watching China fail and just started to ignore them. The US is like, yeah, we got this. We have Taiwan doing our heavy lifting. But a few years later, the jaws of US politicians dropped to the floor when China announced this.
China, that country, denying reports tonight that they have tested a nuclear-capable hypersonic missile.
This is a hypersonic missile, one that could travel at 5 times the speed of sound without being detected by radar. They beat the US to it, and what's even crazier is the US helped them build it without knowing it. China was buying these computer chips from semiconductor companies in the United States, ones that technically were not off limits. Once Joe Biden realized this, he immediately took action.
Today is a day for builders. Today, America is delivering.
Yes, Biden and Trump are on completely opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to political issues.
First of all, I guess I'm debating you, not him, but that's okay. I'm not surprised.
The fact is that everything he's saying so far is simply a lie. I'm not here to call out his lies. Everybody knows he's a liar.
But for this case, they were actually on the same page, and they started banning them from purchasing any chips from US companies. Here's the thing though, for US companies, China is their biggest customer. Almost overnight, they lost a large majority of their revenue. So what does the government do? Well, they do what they do best, giving these US technology companies billions of dollars in funding. So building their own chips didn't work. So now they can not only import the best chips from Taiwan, but they can't even make them. They're looking at their options, they don't have many left. See, one of the things that kept China from invading Taiwan is if they did do so, they would lose the chip production from TSMC. But now, that's no longer an issue. The opportunity costs decrease significantly, and this is where things get a little scary. This is ADIZ, Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone. It is protected airspace that all incoming aircrafts have to identify themselves, or they will be shot down. There is a problem though. Every day, China is sending these fighter pilots into Taiwan's protected airspace and then returning back to mainland without identifying themselves. Now, a similar thing happened a few decades ago, but the US government sent these big tankers, and that kind of got China to back off. The US government tried to do the exact same thing again. They sent out the biggest and baddest things they had. But it didn't work. In fact, look at this spike right here. All credit to Johnny Harris for this. But they ended up sending more aircrafts into airspace because they're basically saying, hey, we're not afraid of you. Bring it on. Not to mention, on the day China was celebrating its independence, it sent a huge influx of these pilots, basically telling Taiwan, you will be ours. Okay, so tensions are high. TSMC needs to find a way that wouldn't jeopardize their company if worse came to worse. So where did they look to? Well, they look to their old friend, the United States. See, to manufacture these chips, they have to develop these things called fabs. It's basically like a giant manufacturing plant for these microchips we've been talking about, but each one of these, unlike maybe a traditional manufacturing plant, costs billions of dollars to build. So you can understand why not a huge number of them exist. But this tension is just too great of an issue to keep all of your chip manufacturing on one place, especially a place that could be invaded at literally any day. So TSMC starts to build a plant in Arizona, which will cost roughly $40 billion. Combined, the company says that these two fabs will pump out around 50,000 wafers a month once they are fully up and running. The US just entered a very economic war with China, to which they certainly did not take lightly. All right, let's take a step back for a second. This isn't just a clashing of chips in the military. This is about something a lot bigger, one that not a lot of people are actually talking about. But the hidden advantage China is trying to gain over other countries is data. But all of the hecticness around China all just comes back down to this one number, 2049. Free economics are out the door, and now governments are using economies as a weapon. This isn't the 1990s. We don't need soldiers on the ground for a war to start. Countries are now expanding into technological and economic warfare, which could be very destructive for the growth of the global economy. Where do we go from here? Well, no one really knows, but it is important to keep an eye on the situation in Taiwan. Oh, and question, knowing what you know now, if you were leading one of these countries, what would you do to help solve the tension? Now, if you enjoyed this video, smash that like button for the YouTube algorithm, subscribe down below, and thank you very much for watching. Look forward to seeing you on the next one.